right, so yesterday was crazy busy. I'm sitting there in the middle of a move to another house, and man, we were busy with April 4th, the 56th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King. And so folks started with texting and calling me. Then I saw social media, and all these folks were talking about Charlamagne the God and being on the Daily Show and him talking about DEI. And I was just like, okay, y'all, I've been busy. So I looked at it 2 or 3 times today, and we've talked about some of these things before that he laid out in it. And so I wanted to deconstruct it because I do have some thoughts about what was said. So we're going to take it from the top, and then I'm going to walk y'all through this and share some things with you that hopefully you can be more well-rounded and informed about the reality of what we're talking about with DEI. Go.
Called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or DEI. It means more fair hiring policies, new anti-discrimination rules for the workplace, and sensitivity training seminars. And the first thing it led to was a shitload of ads.
Real progress on diversity and inclusion doesn't happen without real work.
Say Celebrate Diversity into your X1 voice remote to discover curated content today.
Every day, General Mills serves the world by making food people love. And inclusion is one of our secret ingredients.
At Kraft Heinz, our purpose is to make life delicious. And we believe we can't achieve that without one essential ingredient: diversity. It's diversity that makes life delicious.
We're on a 400-year-long journey, and scars don't fade. But neither does hope.
Ask your doctor if black people are right for you. That's right. Nobody's buying Vaseline because of diversity. Come to think of it, I don't think I've ever actually bought Vaseline. It's just there. Like, it comes with the house, all right? So that's how things stood in 2020, but that was like 15 years ago. Today, when people talk about DEI, it's more likely to sound like this.
DEI is just a rebranded version of
put it on pause.
hating.
Guys, put it on pause right there. All right, so let's unpack this. Now, first and foremost, to understand DEI today, what you have to understand is, how did you even get to DEI? So, and remember, 1968, a report was done. It was commonly known as the Kerner Commission Report. And the report examined the cause of the riots in 1967. And what the result of that report, they concluded, they talked about a lot of issues, and they actually fought back and forth. What they said is there are 2 Americas. There were one white, one black. And one of the recommendations in the Kerner Commission report was that news media greatly contributed to the riot coverage, so therefore it needed to be diversified. So you then begin to see your first influx of African Americans in mainstream media. That really happened after the Kerner. I'm talking about in significant numbers after 1968. So if you look at the early 70s, you really then begin to see your first programs dealing with affirmative action. Why? Well, remember, President Lyndon Baines Johnson used that phrase first when he was at Howard University. Then Richard Nixon is elected. One of Richard Nixon's focus was, in order to reach African Americans, let's tap into economics. So what Nixon did was, Nixon tapped Arthur Fletcher, and Arthur Fletcher many have called the father of affirmative action. Bob Brown, who was a very close associate of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., involved in Operation Breadbasket. Bob Brown had a significant portfolio and was advancing a number of these economic initiatives in the Nixon administration. The reason Earl Graves was able to actually launch Black Enterprise is because he had raised money but did not have enough money, and he was seeking a grant from the federal government. Bob Brown discussed this in his book. And the Nixon folks were trying to block that grant because Earl Graves had worked for Bobby Kennedy. And Bob Brown was like, the hell with that, give him the damn loan. That's how Earl Graves was able to get the loan to launch what we now know as Black Enterprise. And so in the 1970s, you begin to see your first wave of African Americans in corporate America. Now, if you were remember, Jackie Robinson was the first vice president of a major corporation in New York City. So you go into the 1970s, and so you now begin to see African Americans go into corporate America. And the problem is that many of these African Americans, the highest that they got was really vice president of community affairs. We call those the Negro jobs. Those were the jobs where basically their job was to work with the community, and they would show up at the events, and they would come with the big checks with the small numbers and all stuff like that. You had that. Now, Ellis Coles talked about that generation of African Americans in the 70s and 80s in this book. Let's pull it up. The Rage of a Privileged Class. This is the book, right? This is the book right here. Why are middle-class blacks angry? Why should America care? And he talked about the things that they went through because they were hitting that glass ceiling. It is a phenomenal book that you actually ought to read. Once you then, and so you had those affirmative action programs. Remember, you had black mayors. So you had affirmative action programs that were quite significant in Atlanta, Maynard Jackson, Coleman Young in Detroit, Gary Hatcher in Gary, Indiana. You had Stokes in Cleveland, Marion Barry in Washington, D.C., and other places. Then what happens in 1980? Reagan is elected. So now you go into the 80s. Then you have the Supreme Court decision that then began to limit affirmative action programs. Then you saw a shift from affirmative action into diversity. So what you saw in the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, you begin to see these diversity officers, chief diversity officers. Then you shift from diversity or chief global diversity officer to DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, because coming out of the Black Freedom Movement, the focus was on African Americans. Then Title IX hits in 1972, which was about women. And so, who is the greatest beneficiary of affirmative action? White women. So what is known today as DEI is simply the child of the initial affirmative action programs. But what they then did, they began to expand this to not just be for African Americans. It became African Americans, it became white women, it became Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans, it became gay, it became disabled, and then all of a sudden, the critics were like, well, why can't we have diversity of thought? So what was initially programs to target African Americans then began to expand, and so now that broad focus now began to get wide, and all kind of other folks were included. I remember I was speaking in a corporation, and somebody asked me about DEI programs, and I said, black people. They were like, that's it? I said, ethnics. I said, ethnic Americans. I said, I limited that. I wasn't trying to include everybody else because I was focused on exactly what programs were designed for. And so, George Floyd is murdered May 2020. I remember talking to somebody who was in the DEI space. At one point after the death of George Floyd, there were something like 100 open DEI jobs on LinkedIn. I mean, all of a sudden, the jobs opened up. And so you then begin to see corporations posting on Instagram, on Twitter, all these places talking about their support for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was sort of like, really? Really? And so you begin to see that. Then you have these commitments of billions of dollars. Stories have been done on these corporations. The numbers have gone, I've seen numbers anywhere from 30 billion to 100 billion talking about supporting various initiatives all across the country. Let's pull it up. Come on. Here we go. Corporate America's $50 billion promise. That's one story. I've seen other stories where it's even higher. And everything was about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Now, once you begin to unpack DEI, what you begin to realize that something like 75% of the people who had the DEI jobs were white folks. Yep. Weren't black folks. It was white folks. A lot of them women. Now, press play. Let's pick up where Charlamagne left off, and let me unpack the next part.
DEI is just a rebranded version of hating white people.
DEI, in this case, stands for divisive, erroneous, and insidious.
DEI, which stands for didn't earn it.
Discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination.
DEI. DEI stands for Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, and Ice Cube. Yeah. Y'all cheering out there, but do you want with attitude coming to your office? These right-wingers are crazy, right? Jesus. But here's the part where you all stop applauding everything I say. The truth about DEI is that although it's well-intentioned, it's mostly garbage, okay? It's kind of
Freeze
like
right there. Freeze right there. Now, understand, from day one, white folks could not stand affirmative action programs. From day one. If you go back into history, they couldn't stand programs after the Civil War. So at every point, you've had this reluctance because it's like, oh, fine, y'all got some freedoms, but no, we ain't trying to give y'all no jobs. We're trying to give you any housing. And so you had the pushback against affirmative action programs. Then it became, let's get rid of these quota programs. So the folk that you saw, all them Fox News folks, all these anti-DEI people, Christopher Rufo, all these people, these folks have been running their mouths, and you throw in a sprinkle of some black people, some others in there. And they have been opposing these programs because they don't want to deal with white supremacy. They don't want to deal with racism. And see, what they then do is, this is the whole game, and you see it now. Because, the Charlie Kirks of the world. Oh, I'm concerned if there's a black pilot. Candace Owens, all people saying that sort of nonsense. As if we had airplane crashes by white people. See, we're not talking about a significant percentage of people who are in corporate power. We're not. It's largely controlled by white America. Those are just facts. And so critics are going to be critics. They are going to complain about any of these things because they don't want to deal with the underlying issue, which is when it comes to hiring, people pretty much hire who they know. And if all you know are white folks, and if all you see are white folks, and if all you hang out with the white folks, and if you only recruit at schools where there are white folks, then that's exactly who you're going to hire. Press play.
The truth about DEI is that although it's well-intentioned, it's mostly garbage, okay? It's kind of like the Black Little Mermaid. Just because racists hate it doesn't mean it's good. And you know I'm right, because every one of you has sat through one of those diversity training sessions and thought, this is some bullshit. And it's not just you.
Now, here's the whole deal. When we talk about diversity training, I've been in various programs, and what we have to understand is people don't like to be confronted with their own issues. We love to live in our silos, how we were raised, how we were brought up, and we like to look at the world in a certain way. What we don't want to have to do is consider somebody else's perspective. I remember when I was at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and the Maynard Institute was brought in to deal with a training program for us to diversify our sources. And I remember sitting there, and there was a white male business writer, and he was conservative, and he was resisting what they were talking about. And we're sitting there going, but look at who you call. See, for him, he would say, and this is what you hear from white folks today, well, I'm calling the people who I think are well-versed and experts on the topic. Precisely. But the people you're calling, they're nearly all white. Do you even think to call black experts? Do you even think to call black economists? And see, what they would then go, well, I don't understand. Why do I have to call a black economist? You don't have to, but you could call an economist who happens to be black. Because what we see when it comes to how we live and how we work is that that's what folks do. And so if you start looking at contracts, start looking at, well, who's getting these contracts? Well, if the catering company and the legal fees and the architecture company and the engineering company and all professional service. If everybody white, man, that's getting hooked up. But y'all don't think about it. There's a black accounting firm. There's a black law firm that can do some of the outside work. No, see, they don't think about those things. And so the reality of DEI, it is forcing people to get out of their comfort zone and say, diversify who we do business with, provide equity in terms of economics, and include other people. But people hate to have to do that because they don't want to be forced to do it, because that means they have to do some work. That means they don't have to, that means they have to now go seek people. I remember Chris Rock complained about the lack of black people on Saturday Night Live. And he said, here's the problem. The white folks at SNL, they keep going to the same place, Second City in Chicago, or they're going to places in Canada. He said, y'all ain't going to the black comedy clubs. Y'all not going to hang out there. And so what he was saying is, if this is all you know, if you're at SNL, you're Lorne Michaels, and this is all you know, you don't even see all this talent over here. You don't even see all this talent over here. And that's the reality of why you have DEI programs. It's not about, oh, I'm hiring somebody who simply can't do it. But see, that's what the haters do. See, the haters love to frame this thing as, oh, they're not good enough. But you notice, these white folks who criticize DEI, they never, ever seem to question incompetent white people, because they operate from the basis that they're naturally qualified. And they never assign their racial identity to them getting hired. So they'll say, well, we had to hire a black person. We had to hire a black lawyer. We had to hire that. But you hired all these white folks. What do they all have in common? That's what we're now seeing with the criticism of DEI. Push play.
And it's not just you. Over 900 studies have shown that DEI programs don't make the workplace better for minorities. In fact, it can actually make things worse because of the backlash effect.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where I have a fundamental problem with what Charlamagne said there. Because this notion that, well, it makes it harder in the workplace because these people don't like it. I don't give a shit if they don't like it. I don't care. Because the fact of the matter is, it does matter. And when you listen to all of these haters, they're actually lying. This, folks, is from the Pew Research Center. You see, May 17th, 2023. Workplace diversity and equity and inclusion efforts, or DEI, a majority of Americans employed, 56%, say focusing on DEI at work is a good thing. 6 in 10 Americans, 61%, say their company or organization has policies that ensure fairness in hiring, pay, or promotion. 52% say they have trainings or meetings on DEI at work. Now, you start going through this, and the folks who have been interviewed, yes, look at this here. Relatively small share of workers place a lot of importance on diversity at their workplace. More than half of workers say their company or organization pays about the right amount of attention to increasing DEI. Women are more likely than men to value DEI at work. There are wide partisan differences in views of workplace DEI. 78% of Democratic and Democratic-leaning workers say focusing on DEI at work is a good thing, compared with 30% of Republicans and Republican leaners. Now you understand. What is the Republican Party? It's a white party. President Herbert Hoover was a leader of what was called the Lily White movement, where Republicans who came out of the radical Republicans after the Civil War aligned with the KKK to suppress black people. It was called the Lily White movement. That's today's Republican Party. See, they hate all this DEI stuff. It's right there in the data. Only 30% of Republicans like it. So when you're watching Fox News and you're hearing conservative radio, all these digital sites, what you're hearing are people who are, oh my God, this DEI stuff is awful, because it lines up with actually their point of view. Because they don't actually want to see people like us actually move ahead. Press play.
Remember Dare from school? Y'all remember Dare? Yeah. She said, woo. DEI training is like Dare for racism. And you all know how effective that was. I was sitting there going, oh, shit, there's a ton of fun drugs I should try. I didn't even know about Molly. Thanks, Officer John. But the biggest failure of DEI is that the number of black people in power at big companies is basically the same as it was 5 years ago. In fact, maybe the only thing that DEI has accomplished is giving racist white people cover to be openly racist.
Now, again, this is where Charlamagne's wrong. Here are the number of African Americans who are now CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. There are 9. Now, first of all, I said Fortune 500 companies, so we ain't talking a huge amount. But the reality is, just 5 years ago, a few years ago, there were 5. Okay? So what you are seeing, the progress. Now, here's the issue. The problem that you see in the Executive Leadership Council, the group of black corporate leaders, they've dealt with this, is that for many of these leaders who are black people who are in corporate America, the problem is, when they get to 55, 58, they're being moved out. And so they're still hitting a ceiling. That is a fundamental problem that we are seeing. But that means when we're talking about DEI, you're going to have white folks who make it a priority. I'm going to unpack that in a second. Press play.
DEI breeds complacency, Dana, and complacency kills.
We're going to have doctors who don't know how to perform heart surgery, and we're going to have planes that are falling out of the sky.
Boeing recently bragged not about being the best in the business, but about surpassing its diversity quotas. Oh, goody. But then, not so good, a door flying off one of Boeing's 737 Supermaxes.
I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
I mean, honestly, when I see a black pilot, I'm not worried that we're going to crash. I'm worried that we're going to get pulled over. Okay? That's right. That's right. And no, officer, I will not step out of this vehicle. All right? But yeah, they're blaming DEI for everything. Even that bridge in Baltimore. They called Baltimore's mayor the DEI mayor, like he was given the job for being black. Then they said the shipping company was too focused on DEI instead of safety. But almost the entire leadership of the company is white. No black people, right? If anything, the Baltimore mayor, he should have been the one to make it racist. Just come out like, these crackers knocked down my bridge, okay? All right? And one of y'all crackers better pay for it, okay? And honestly, I'm not surprised these programs didn't work. And here's why. It's just corporate PR. They want good vibes. And also, they want to cover their ass, okay? Did you know that if a company gets sued for civil rights violations, just having a DEI program will be counted as evidence in their favor, even if the program doesn't do shit, okay? It's the I have a black friend of the legal system, all right? We don't need corporate DEI. Yes, we want diversity and equity and inclusion, but we don't want it from Vaseline. Although I'm not going to front, Vaseline has been there for the black community. Respect, okay? Right? That's right. Moisturized, okay? Look, man, real DEI is only going to come from black leadership. I don't know how to do it because I'm not a black leader, but I do know how to tell if it's working. Just keep an eye on right-wing media. The more they're freaking out, the more progress we're making.
Okay, this is where Charlamagne is flat out wrong. So when he says that we don't need DEI from corporate America, it's not true. And he says it's going to come from black people. Here's the problem with that. Put the graphic back up. There are only 9 black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. That means that there are 491 non-black CEOs of Fortune 500 company. The reality is you are going to need white people who actually believe in diversity, equity, inclusion for that to happen. And there are examples. Al Newharth, he was the founder of USA Today. Al Newharth grew up in South Dakota. He did not grow up around a lot of black people. But Al Newharth understood the value of diversity. So when Al Newharth was the CEO of Gannett, he made a declaration that Gannett was going to be the leading company in America when it came to the issue of diversity. I had a syndicated column with Creator Syndicate. And when Al Newharth died in 1989, this here is exactly what I wrote. Quote, his obituary in the New York Times read, in an industry long dominated by white men, Mr. Newharth led the way in the hiring and promotion of women and minorities, tying compensation to hiring goals. By 1988, the proportion of minorities in Gannett newsrooms was 47% higher than the national average. Women accounted for nearly 40% of the company's managers, professionals, technicians, and sales agents, and an unheard of quarter of its newspaper publishers. In Al Newharth's book, Confession of an SOB, he actually wrote that when he launched this particular initiative, that people were angry. Folks were upset with him. And he said point blank, if any of y'all have a problem with me tying your bonuses to your diversity numbers, you're free to leave the company. And guess what? A lot did. But you know what happened? You saw an explosion of black people, Hispanics, white women, and others who became publishers, news directors, managing editors, general managers of media company. And guess what that did? That forced all the other media companies to go, damn, we about to lose our minority talent, so we now got to change our programs. So guess what happened? Knight Ridder, Cox, and the others began to change. The problem is we didn't have enough Al Newharths in media to change the industry. He was by himself. That's another example. John Landgraf. John Landgraf is the CEO of FX, the cable network. Now, you've seen many of those programs. You've seen Donald Glover's show, Atlanta, shows along those lines. Well, guess what? John Landgraf sat there and looked at his shows. And he then began to say, wait a minute, we got a problem. It's too many white guys. It's too many white directors. It's too many white showrunners. It's too many white writers. We can't tell different stories by keep hiring white folks. He was quoted saying, listen, I like my white guys. This is not going to work. So in 2016, John Landgraf sent out an email to his entire network and said, this has to change. In 2021, check this out. Nearly half of all episodes on FX were directed by people of color. Women were 35% of those who directed those episodes. But it wasn't just directors. And listen to this, quote, truthfully, I'm not proud of fact it took me so long to take concerted action on inclusiveness. He said, hold on one second. He said, because he'd been running the network at that time for 15 years. It's heartening to see our industry fully commit to meaningful, measurable, and permanent change. He said, when FX was radically over-indexing in one race and gender, we were by definition overlooking talent. When we started looking for talent in every segment of our population, our shows got better. When you're in the talent business, diversity is good for business. Now, that's why Charlamagne is wrong. The reality is, black folks ain't running these joints. We're not running these companies. Now, we may push folks, you may have a few folks in there, but you need operational leaders. Jonathan Rogers, who was the first CEO of TV One. When Jonathan Rogers joined the board of Comcast, I was like, yo, that's awesome. He's like, not really. I was like, hold up. Now, y'all, Jonathan was on the board of Procter & Gamble. He was on the board of Nike. And I was like, Jonathan, are you serious? He said, I didn't want a board job. He said, Roland, I want an operational job. I was like, but is it a board job better than an operational job? He said, no. I said, Jonathan, why? He said, because if I had an operational job, that's where you hire. He said, by the time it gets to the board, we don't control hiring. He said, we just sit here and oversee the CEO. That was an instructive thing he actually said to me. So what we have to understand is that for DEI to work, you've got to actually have individuals who are in power, for the most part, they're going to be white, who are making the decisions in order to be able to affect the change. This is where we, again, make a mistake on this very issue. And so Mark Cuban, he's been very much talking about a lot of these issues. He's been focusing on a lot of these issues. And so I sent Mark Cuban, don't pull it up yet, I sent Mark Cuban an email to get his particular thoughts. And I wanted to get him on the show because he's been going back and forth against Christopher Rufo, against Elon Musk, slamming them on this issue of diversity. I mean, he's been swinging on them. And so I sent Mark an email and I said, hey, we'd love to have you on the show, but if you can't come on the show, share me some thoughts. And so this is the email that Mark Cuban, of course, owner of the Mavericks, well, he sold the team, but this is what he sent me back. He said, Roland, look at the top 10 market cap companies. All have DEI programs, even Tesla. 3 of the top 4 are run by people of color. The other, Apple, by a gay man. All make DEI a priority. My general position is that I believe DEI is really good for business. People trust people who look like them. They want to do business with them. But to me, it's not about hiring heads of DEI and creating a bureaucracy or doing commercials like Charlamagne CTG criticized. It's about following good DEI business principles. Diversity is looking for great people where others don't. There are a lot of smart people that are ignored for jobs. Find them where others aren't looking. Equity is where the right goes nuts. They think it's about quotas and making sure no one has an advantage or can succeed beyond anyone else. Equity is putting your employees in a position to succeed. That's it. Training, support, etc. If you hire someone smart, no matter what they look like, give them the tools to make you more successful. Inclusion, make people feel good about themselves at work. That's just smart business. He is right. We need more black leaders. But when you are only 8% of the white-collar workforce, it takes time. And he contradicted himself. Can racists freak out any more than they are now? Everything is about DEI, which is another way of saying people of color aren't qualified. They can't do the job. They only get it because of DEI. Look at the people that work for you. Where do you recruit? How do you put your employees in a position to succeed? How do you make people who are different feel included? You have been an entrepreneur for a long time. Talk about your business and your experience. You don't have to have a DEI program to practice DEI. You just have to run your business the right way and set standards for how people are treated. And folks, right there, the fundamental issue with DEI programs as to how they are set up right now is that they are performative because the leaders are not serious. The leaders are not taking proactive decisions. The leaders are not sitting here going, wait a minute, who has all of our outside legal work and our accounting work? We're spending money on catering. Do we have any black caterers? We spend how much money on flowers for the office? Are we using any black florists? We spend money on audiovisual. Are we using any black audiovisual companies? How much of our money is going to spend on advertising? Oh, the ad agency we're using, are they diverse? Oh, we're not going to spend our money with lily white ad agencies. Oh, y'all see how that works? That's what a leader does. So you can't have white folks over here talking about pull yourself up by your bootstrap, why y'all can't get ahead, why you're always begging the government for money. But then over here, we're frozen out of jobs, we're frozen out of contracts, and frozen out of opportunities, and then you complain about DEI. So what I need folks to understand, and again, it was a comedy segment, and it was 5.5 minutes. I've already gone 38 minutes. But the reality when we talk about what's happening with DEI, these white racists and these haters, they are trying to attack everything that is positioning black people where we are today. They're suing the Fearless Fund. They're targeting every program in corporate America. They're targeting law firms. You name it, that's what they're doing. Because of this, and I wrote about it, and y'all, everything you're seeing I called, it's white fear. They now have to compete. And so what they don't like is, wait a minute, y'all now recruiting at HBCUs? Oh, no. They're not smart enough. See, they couldn't get into our schools, so therefore they had to go to those schools. Oh, yeah. You see what happens when they come out of these high schools and they come to our schools and they're on academic probation the first or second year? But those same people don't want to confront the economic inequality at those high schools, then those junior highs, then the elementary schools. Oh, then you don't want to confront the economic inequality that's happening in those neighborhoods. Oh, then you don't want to confront the economic inequality that those parents went through. Damn, then you don't want to confront the economic inequality that those grandparents went through. See, it's real easy to act like we're all running from the same mark and running a race when we all know that's not the case. And so the attacks on DEI, they are absolutely anti-blackness. The problem with corporate America is that there are too many white folks in corporate America who are playing games when it comes to DEI. They're handing out DEI jobs and the people have no budgets. They got no P&L responsibility. And the leadership of the companies, it's not a priority. In order for DEI to truly be effective in America, we're gonna need 1,000 Al Newharts. And we're gonna need 1,000 John Landgrafs. We're gonna need white executives, white men, white women to actually be honest about their failures when it comes to leading. That was what has to happen. So if you're breaking down this segment and you are, oh my goodness, what went on here? This is the whole deal. To corporate America, stop being performative. That's why we in the Black-owned Media Collective, that's why we challenge General Motors. That's why we challenge McDonald's. That's why we challenge these companies. And you know what happened? Target was like, oh, we're going to spend $2 billion with black companies. All of a sudden, Group M announced 30 or 40 of their companies, some named, a lot not. They're going to spend at least 2% of their ad budgets with black-owned media. We're still waiting because we haven't gotten any money from Group M here at the Black Star Network. And I've been meeting with them for a very long time, 3 years. We've gotten zero. I've been meeting with Publicis for the past several weeks because we got the runaround from Publicis for 3 years. And we're finally meeting with chief investment officers. I met with OMD after getting the runaround, met last year, a CIO left, so now we're trying to meet with their chief investment officer. There are other ad agencies we're trying to reach as well. So here's the deal. You can't tell black people, well, you're not building your business. Well, I can't get the contract. Well, you need access to capital. Well, no, I ain't got no debt. I can look right now. I got money in the bank, so I need contracts. I can't grow my business. I can't hire more people if I don't have the contracts. See, if we talk about the reality of DEI, nothing is going to change as long as you have scared, timid, weak, impotent, white corporate leaders who are unwilling to look their friends, their country club pals, and their family members in the eye and say, a lot of the shit that comes out of your mouth is racist. And the fact of the matter is, America and these companies are not going to be able to grow if we do not have diverse initiatives. Last point. Charlamagne said, well, I don't want DEI when it comes to Vaseline. Unilever owns them. Unilever owns a ton of companies. Unilever owns a ton of companies where we as black folks buy products. Oh, hell yes, Unilever had better have a strong-ass DEI program. And Unilever and Clorox and Procter & Gamble and Apple and all of these companies need to be spending money with black-owned media, need to be spending money with black law firms, need to be spending money with black accounting firms, need to be spending money with black engineering firms, need to be spending money with African Americans up and down their business diversity list, not supplier diversity, business diversity. What we're seeing with the attacks of DEI are from, frankly, scared white people who don't want to confront systemic racism in corporate America. But this is a moment when white leadership, while you have these lawsuits going on, has to have the courage to say, we aren't going anywhere. We're going to do what Al Newharth did. And that's say, if you don't like the fact that we support diversity, equity, inclusion, you, white critic, are more than happy to leave. Because I bet you we're going to be successful in finding your replacement, and they likely will be black or person of color.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.